Welcome to the deep dive. If you're joining us today, chances are you already feel it.
Oh, you definitely feel it.
The subject we're tackling is anything but quiet. We live in a world that is just defined by noise.
It really is. It's the constant clamor of notifications, the urgency of the news
The
cycle.
pressure to produce, that feeling that if you slow down for even a second, you're just going to be left behind.
And it's more than just the external noise, too, isn't it? It's that internal hum of striving, that feeling that our worth is somehow tied directly to our output or our visibility.
Yes,
The volume knob feels like it's permanently stuck on high, and, frankly, it's exhausting.
it is absolutely
Yeah.
exhausting. And because that striving is so ingrained in modern life,
Yeah.
we're undertaking a really profound and I think deeply countercultural deep dive today. We are synthesizing a powerful essay for thoughtful adult Christians that explores the biblical mandate to embrace the quiet life. Our mission is to really excavate this concept from the sources, from the ancient wisdom and the apostolic commands, and try to understand what it truly means for our 21st century anxiety.
And I think we have to start by just recalibrating our definition. The key insight of this entire study, and this really has to anchor our whole conversation, is that biblical quietness is not withdrawal.
That's so
It
important.
is not spiritual passivity or apathy. It is instead a steady, robust, and actually active posture of faith. It's designed for the growth of righteousness.
That is a crucial distinction.
Yeah.
It reframes the entire mission, doesn't it? Because the New Testament actually calls this concept an ambition.
Right, and ambition.
Specifically, the Apostle Paul tells the church in Thessalonica, make it your ambition to lead a quiet life. That phrasing, make it your ambition, it just demands that this is a deliberate spiritual pursuit. It's not some accidental byproduct of your temperament.
It truly changes the weight of the instruction. And ambition is something you train for, right? It's something you intentionally structure your life around. So what Paul is setting up here is a powerful contrast. He's telling them to aspire to a life that is intensely productive and peaceable, but he's contrasting it directly with the noise of strife and the emptiness that Ecclesiastes identifies as toil and chasing the wind.
Chasing the wind, it's such a powerful image for so much of modern life.
It is, and the prophets consistently tell us that true, enduring strength is rooted in quietness and trust, and that, that precludes the need for all the frantic scheme-making or the public display we feel pressured into.
Okay, so let's unpack this ambition. If quietness is a spiritual discipline that we actually have to train for, where did God first introduce this idea? We need to look at the historical and cultural background, which the essay calls the classrooms of quietness. It seems the lessons began long, long before the New Testament church.
That's right. The source material draws a really clear line. It suggests that Israel learned this quiet posture in two major formative environments. The first was the school of wisdom, and the second was the school of exile.
Let's start with that school of wisdom then. This is found primarily in the Proverbs. How did the wisdom writers establish quietness as, moral good?
Well, the wisdom literature, it prioritizes the atmosphere of peace over pretty much everything else, including material achievement. It asks us to make some pretty radical choices about what we truly value.
Can you give an example of that?
Sure. Think about Proverbs 17.1. It says, "Better a dry crust with peace and quiet than a house full of feasting with strife."
Wow.
The moral weight of that statement is just profound. It dictates that material abundance, the house full of feasting, is actually worthless or maybe even detrimental if it comes bundled with agitation and discord and strife.
It sets up an internal economy then,
Mhm.
where tranquility is the highest currency. But that is so difficult in practice. We are so often culturally programmed to chase the feast, and we just assume we can manage the strife that comes with it.
Precisely. And wisdom literature challenges that assumption head on. It forces us to recognize that the noise of striving is fundamentally destructive, not just to our own souls, but to the community as a whole.
So it's not just an individual pursuit.
Not at all. And this classroom also taught the practice of waiting. Psalm 37.7 commands us to be still before the Lord and wait patiently for him. And we are explicitly warned not to get agitated or restless because of the temporary success of evildoers.
That distinction, quiet waiting before the Lord versus agitation, that seems critical. Agitation suggests a lack of trust in God's timeline or his justice, doesn't it?
It does.
But waiting patiently, especially when we feel wronged or when things are just moving too slowly, that requires immense self-control.
It requires the belief that God is active, even when we can't see his movement or feel his intervention. The waiting itself becomes a discipline. It becomes a discipline of quiet faith. It moves us away from trying to control outcomes and toward trusting God's character.
And that tension, trusting God, while circumstances are chaotic, that leads us directly into the second classroom you mentioned, the school of exile.
Yes.
So when the nation of Judah was forcibly removed from their home and placed under foreign rule in Babylon, what instructions did God give them about how to live? This seems like the ultimate test of quiet faithfulness.
It was indeed. I mean, the natural impulse during exile is to seethe, right? To plot rebellion, or maybe just to surrender to despair. But through Jeremiah, the Lord gave instructions for immediate, faithful, constructive engagement.
And what were they?
He says, build houses and live in them, plant gardens and eat their produce, seek the peace and prosperity of the city to which I have carried you into exile. Pray to the Lord for it, because if it prospers, you too will prosper.
Wait, let me just pause there. That instruction is stunningly counterintuitive. They were told to build and plant in the city of their captors, to seek its prosperity and to pray for it.
Yeah.
That sounds like a long-term commitment to peace, not just, temporary quietness while waiting for rescue.
It is exactly that. The essay calls this a posture of calm faithfulness that fundamentally resisted restless plan-making and frantic schemes for an immediate escape.
So instead of running to foreign alliances or trusting human schemes.
They were commanded to commit to ordinary, productive obedience right where they were.
And what was the spiritual implication of choosing that kind of quietness over the clamor of, say, political action?
It became what the essay calls a survival liturgy. By seeking the peace of Babylon, they were implicitly trusting that their ultimate deliverance lay solely in God's timing and his power, not in their own political maneuvering. The prophet Isaiah had already summarized this idea when he was addressing the opposite behavior in Judah, warning them against multiplying counsel and running to Egypt for help. Isaiah 30.15 states it so plainly, "In repentance and rest is your salvation. In quietness and trust is your strength."
So the corrective wasn't just silence.
No, it was a return to humble, prayerful dependence.
So the strength isn't in the quietness itself. The strength is in the faith that fuels the quietness. It's a profound shift in where we think our source of power comes from.
It shifts the entire engine of our lives. If our strength is rooted in trust, we don't need to operate out of panic. We can adopt the posture that Micah defined for the faithful life, just walking humbly with God.
Walking humbly.
And the essay breaks that down using 3 simple concepts: pace, posture, and path. It's about steady steps that don't require spectacle or public validation.
That internal discipline prepares us perfectly for the external pressures we see when we get to the New Testament world. So let's move to that cultural contrast of the Greco-Roman Empire. What kind of noise was the early church confronting there?
Oh, the Greco-Roman world was defined by what the essay calls the noisy forums. Status, power, significance. It was all intrinsically linked to public visibility.
So you had to be seen.
You had to be seen. You gained social power through patronage, through rhetorical display, through the acquisition of public honor. Everything was highly competitive, it was loud, and it was geared toward proving your worth through external, visible achievements.
And this makes the apostolic commands just utterly revolutionary. When the apostles commanded quietness, they weren't just giving some nice spiritual advice. They were issuing a radically countercultural political and social statement.
They absolutely were.
What specific commands did they issue?
They commended a radically different ambition in 3 main areas. First, relationally. Romans 12.18 mandates, if it is possible, as much as depends on you, live peaceably with all men.
So that requires active management of friction. You have to choose peace over provocation.
You do. And second, it was communal, relating to the state. This brings us to 1 Timothy 2, which is a vital passage for this discussion.
Okay.
Paul urges prayer for rulers and authorities, specifically so that the church may live peaceful and quiet lives in all godliness and holiness.
So it was a prayer for stability, not so the church could seize power.
No, not at all. It was so the gospel could flourish quietly and without unnecessary external strife. It was about obtaining a space to worship and to live faithfully.
That reframes what Christian political engagement looks like. The ultimate goal isn't political agitation, but stable ground for quiet godliness. And what was the third command? It relates to daily vocation, right?
Precisely. It was about adorning the gospel through steady work and integrity in your ordinary callings. This speaks directly against that Roman pursuit of status. The community marked by this quiet strength stood out because they were not chasing the loud displays of the empire. They taught converts a new way to inhabit the world by letting their good conduct among the Gentiles be the true witness.
So if we synthesize these stages,
Hmm.
you have the law demanding trust in God's timing, the exile demanding faithful presence, then Christ enthroning meekness, and finally the Spirit forming a peaceful people. You really do see this beautiful, gentle thread running through God's entire plan, just as the essay suggests.
It's a continuum. It's a process where God is systematically weaning his people off a reliance on visible, loud human power. The fruit of the Spirit, which is the signature of the New Testament, life, love, joy, peace, patience, gentleness, self-control, it describes a life lived at a different tempo and a different tone entirely.
It's inherently a quiet life.
It has to be.
It's one thing to discuss the theological principles, but it's entirely another to see it embodied.
Yeah.
Let's look at the biblical narrative for some specific portraits of this quiet strength in action, starting with the Old Testament.
Hannah is a really compelling starting point in 1 Samuel. She was under immense personal distress, right, because of her barrenness and the constant provocation of Peninnah.
Right.
But when she poured out her soul before the Lord, she did it without any fanfare. The text says her lips moved, but her voice was not heard.
Yeah, the priest Eli even thought she was drunk because her prayer was so physically quiet.
Exactly. She took her deepest anxiety and she presented it directly to God, not in some clamor for attention or for vindication from others, but in quiet, profound dependence. And the outcome is the key here.
What's the outcome?
She left the sanctuary with a quieted heart and a settled countenance. And this was before she got the promise of a son. She was trusting God's remembrance. That is quiet faith conquering inner agitation.
That shows that quietness isn't the absence of struggle. It's the manner in which we conduct that struggle. So
Right.
taking the fight to God in prayer rather than, polluting the external environment with our internal strife.
Well said. And moving from that inner turmoil to outer restraint, David provides another magnificent portrait.
Okay.
When he was being hunted unjustly by King Saul, he had the perfect opportunity to assassinate his pursuer in the cave.
His men even urged him to do it.
They did, but he actively restrained his hand. He refused to grasp for the crown or for vindication. He refused to generate noise through self-exaltation.
He waited for the Lord to vindicate him in his due time.
He did. And he models what it means to settle one's soul. Later, he describes this settled confidence in Psalm 131, which is a passage that's just central to understanding this. He says, "O Lord, my heart is not proud, nor my eyes haughty, nor do I involve myself in great matters or in things too wonderful for me. Surely I have composed and quieted my soul, like a weaned child rests against his mother. My soul is quiet within me."
That imagery of the weaned child is extremely rich. It implies the child has moved past that initial clamor and agitation for immediate satisfaction, that noisy demand for milk,
Yes.
and to a settled trust in the mother's presence and provision, even when the immediate physical desire isn't being met.
That's the depth of it. It's a spiritual weaning from self-reliance and from the need for immediate control. David is saying his soul no longer throws a tantrum when he doesn't get his way or when he's called to wait.
Right.
His ambition is no longer too great or too marvelous for him. He has contained his aspirations within the boundaries of God's revealed will. That kind of submission is profoundly quiet.
Then we have Elijah, who was certainly a man of zeal and dramatic confrontations, yet even he was forced into the classroom of quietness on Mount Horeb.
That's right. Elijah was ready for the spectacle. He was looking for the wind, the earthquake, the fire, the loud displays of divine power. That's often what we expect from God's action, too. But God was not in those loud, dramatic forces. He was revealed in a low whisper. This was God's training, forcing this zealous prophet to learn to listen more than to bluster.
Do you think, for us as modern listeners, just saturated in constant information and notifications and loud media, do you think our spiritual hearing has been damaged? Are we even capable of hearing that low whisper anymore?
I think that is a fundamental challenge of our time. Our current environment rewards volume and it rewards spectacle. The quiet life, conversely, demands sustained attention and reverence.
So if we can only be moved by the fire and the earthquake.
We risk missing the constant, gentle presence of God in the ordinary details of life. We risk missing the primary mode through which God communicates to a trusting heart.
And this need for restraint is echoed so clearly in wisdom literature, especially when it talks about our speech.
Absolutely. Proverbs 15.1 states that a soft answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger. This is quiet strength in public relations. It's choosing de-escalation over provocation.
And the essay highlights another proverb too, doesn't it?
Yes, Proverbs 25.15, noting that by patience a ruler may be persuaded and a soft tongue breaks the bone. The quiet persistence of gentle, measured interaction patience can achieve what loud aggression simply cannot.
And moving to the New Testament, all these threads of quiet trust and meekness seem to crystallize in Jesus Christ.
He is the master of quietness. His invitation in Matthew 11 is the very foundation of the quiet life. He says, "Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls."
So the quiet life is defined here as a schooling in meekness taken up at the Master's pace. We are learning how to be gentle and humble from the one who has all authority.
And we see the contrast between quiet focus and worried clamor in that famous story of Mary and Martha.
Right. In Luke 10,
Martha was worried and upset about many things. Those are the telltale symptoms of a noisy inner life, driven by anxious energy. Mary, conversely, sat at Jesus' feet just to listen.
and it's so important to clarify that Jesus wasn't condemning Martha's work, was he? He was correcting her worry and her distraction from the one necessary thing, which was focused, quiet attention on him.
Exactly. The lesson is that our service, however necessary it is, must flow from that settled place of listening and quiet attention. Otherwise, it just becomes another form of striving. And that principle brings us right back to Paul's specific, actionable charge to the Thessalonians.
This is where the theological ambition really meets the ground floor of daily life.
It is. 1 Thessalonians 4.1:112 is the definitive command. They are to aspire to a quiet life, mind their own affairs, and work with their hands.
So Paul is directly tackling two major threats to community quietness.
He is idleness, which leads to dependence, and meddling, which leads to strife. And Paul later doubles down on this, commanding those who are idle to settle down and earn the bread they eat.
So the quiet life is absolutely not a lazy life. It's a diligent life focused on tangible, constructive labor, and it avoids dependency and nosiness.
It connects back perfectly to the exile instructions. Build, plant, work. Tangible, ordinary obedience is the sign of a settled soul. And this is further reinforced by Peter, who elevates the inner beauty of a gentle and quiet spirit as something precious to God.
And Peter also connects external conduct to quietness, urging believers to maintain good conduct among the nations so that their well-doing will silence the ignorance of foolish people. It's a quiet witness that diffuses opposition.
It is the strategic refusal to engage in the mudslinging contest. This entire package, prayerful dependence, humility, contentment, steady work, peaceable interaction, it's all summarized by James as the very nature of heavenly wisdom.
Wisdom that is pure, peace-loving, considerate.
And full of good fruit. None of those traits require clamor or aggressive self-promotion. They describe a steady, durable faith that allows the quiet life to become the normal, recognizable gait of a thoughtful Christian.
That discussion leads us right into the core theological why. What gives the believer the freedom and the strength to adopt this countercultural posture? The essay anchors it fundamentally in the sovereignty of God.
It's the ultimate spiritual foundation. Quietness is the necessary posture of a heart that recognizes God's complete reign. If the Lord truly reigns, if He is in control of outcomes and justice, then we don't need to grasp for vindication or control or self-protection.
We can be still and know that He is God.
Exactly. From Psalm 46.
That verse, Psalm 26.10, it often feels so aspirational, doesn't it? Especially when we face real chaos or war or a personal crisis. How do we move from just an intellectual assent to that idea to, an emotional and spiritual stillness?
I think we have to practice relinquishment. Stillness in the face of chaos is possible only because we believe the Lord will be exalted among the nations and He will be exalted in the earth. Our stillness becomes an active witness to His future, guaranteed victory.
So it frees us from the need to manage the narrative.
Or dictate the timing of events.
Yeah.
Yes.
But I want to introduce some friction here, because I think a common modern misunderstanding is that this biblical stillness sounds a lot like spiritual resignation. How does this active confidence differ from fatalism?
That is a critical question, and we have to address it with care. Fatalism is rooted in despair or indifference. It says, whatever happens, happens, so why bother trying? It breeds apathy, and it often breeds neglect.
Okay.
Biblical quietness or active confidence is rooted in hope and determined spiritual surrender.
So the motivation is completely different.
Completely. Active confidence moves the believer to prayer rather than from prayer. It asks for guidance rather than demanding immediate outcomes. It trusts that the Father gives good gifts and that we are to make our requests known, but with thanksgiving.
Right. It's resting in the commitment to action, knowing the results are in God's hands. Fatalism is resting from the commitment due to hopelessness.
That clarity is essential. The essay suggests there are 4 practical virtues that serve as the internal engines that fuel this active, quiet life. Let's dedicate some time to each one. The first is prayer.
Prayer is designated as the first engine because it's the place where our internal noise meets God's quiet sovereignty. When Paul commanded prayer for rulers, his immediate objective was clear, so that the church might lead peaceful and quiet lives.
So the primary effect of prayer is often internal.
Often, yes, it softens our anxieties, it orders our loves, and it aligns our desires with God's will.
And the essay points out that Jesus himself provides the ultimate example of this fuel source. His public strength was constantly being renewed by private quietness.
Think about the intensity of his public life, the crowds, the teaching, the healing, the constant political tension. Yet the gospel writers repeatedly show him habitually withdrawing to lonely places to pray. Mark 1.35, Luke 5.16.
Yes, he was modeling the constant need to pull back from the clamor to recalibrate his mission and his pace according to the Father's will. Without that private quietness, his public ministry would have inevitably descended into frantic human striving.
So learning from Christ, then, means that prayer is the place where we transform the inner noise of worry into ordered, submissive petitions and worship.
It is the daily antidote to the urge to scheme and to control. If you find yourself in a state of high anxiety, the first remedy is often not faster action, but deeper, quieter prayer.
The second engine is humility, which the essay poetically calls the quiet life's clothing. Why does humility quiet us down?
Because pride generates maximum noise. The proud heart constantly needs validation, attention, and control. It needs to advertise itself to secure its position. The humble heart is free from that frantic requirement. It can serve unseen, trusting the promise that the Father who sees in secret rewards what pleases him.
Okay, but I have to push back on that for a moment. In the modern economy, especially for young professionals, you feel like you have to be loud. You have to advocate for yourself, promote your skills, and make sure you're not overlooked. If I put on humility and choose quiet service, don't I risk being overlooked, passed over, or even trampled by the loud?
That is the deep tension of living the quiet life in a competitive world, and the sources speak directly to it. Biblical humility doesn't mean being a doormat. It means releasing the need for human validation.
Ah, okay.
The goal isn't to be overlooked. The goal is to be freed from the compulsion to promote yourself. We are called to put on humility, gentleness, and patience, letting the peace of Christ rule. Our conviction remains, but our tone is governed by the Spirit, trusting that faithful work done quietly wins respect, just as Paul promised.
That's a crucial distinction. Releasing the need for self-promotion, not the responsibility for diligence.
Exactly. Humility ensures that our conviction has a tone that fits the gentle nature of the gospel.
And that flows right into the third engine, contentment. So if pride drives the clamor for status, does discontent drive the clamor for acquisition?
Absolutely. Discontent is the fuel for the world's frantic more. It's the engine behind consumerism, envy, and the internal anxiety that drives so many quarrels and complaints.
And Paul addresses this head-on.
He does, famously saying he learned the secret of being content in every situation, whether in abundance or in poverty, through Christ's strength. Contentment is a learned spiritual skill. It's not a natural temperament.
And once we learn it, what does it free us from?
It frees us from the constant grasping. The calmed soul that David modeled in Psalm 131 is one that is no longer chasing things too great or too marvelous. Contentment is chosen trust. It receives today's provision, our daily bread, our manna, as sufficient, and it willingly entrusts tomorrow's needs to the Lord's concern.
A content soul doesn't need to chase status or success at a breakneck pace.
Because its source of security is outside of its circumstances.
And finally, the fourth engine is kindness. This is where the quiet posture translates into constructive public action.
Kindness is quiet strength expressed externally, especially in conflict. We can go right back to Proverbs 15. A soft answer turns away wrath. Kindness refuses escalation.
It chooses blessing over cursing.
Yes, and it patiently seeks to overcome evil with good, as Paul says in Romans 12. In a world that expects us to immediately match volume with volume, kindness provides a surprising silence, a moment of de-escalation that can disarm an adversary.
So the quiet life is fundamentally constructive and restorative. Its energy is directed towards building up, not tearing down. The essay puts it so well, aiming words like tools to build up rather than like weapons to tear down.
That's the entire objective. The fruit of the Spirit, gentleness, patience, peace, is meant to grow within the community, ensuring our strength is used for mercy and building, rather than for self-vindication or destruction.
Now, before we move to application, we absolutely have to address the final critical distinction the essay raises, the difference between quietness and cowardice.
A vital point.
We know Scripture calls us to speak plainly, to confront sin, and to defend the weak. How does this demand for principled courage square with the quiet life?
This is a vital point for the thoughtful believer. Quietness never equates to cowardice. There are absolute moments where we must speak plainly, stand for justice, or confront sin, just as Jesus and Paul demonstrated.
Okay.
The key, however, lies in the manner of the confrontation.
And what governs that manner?
It must be governed by the very virtues we just discussed: prayer, humility, and kindness. The goal is that courage does not become clamor and boldness does not become bluster.
I like that phrasing.
The objective of the communication should be restoration and truth, not the release of our personal frustration. Our stand must be firm because of deep conviction, but our tone must remain restful because of our dependence on the Lord.
So whether we are resting in contentment or standing in confrontation, the governing virtue is the same. The Lord is near, and his meekness sets the pace.
Exactly. Our quietness becomes a witness to the fact that we serve a king who came meekly, riding on a donkey, yet he holds all power. We reflect his power best when our tone is controlled, godly, and peaceful.
This has given us such a deep theological foundation. Now, for the listener who is preparing for another week in the noisy world, how do we take these principles and turn them into specific actionable practices? The essay provides 4 key applications, starting with structuring our days around quietness.
This first practice is a direct attempt to seize the day before the world seizes us. It means practicing a daily liturgy of quiet.
A daily liturgy, what does that look like?
It means intentionally beginning the day with scripture and prayer before the flood of digital voices, emails, or news alerts arrive. This is about casting your anxieties on the Lord right away, before they have a chance to set a chaotic tone for your day.
That seems like a non-negotiable step. Establishing the priority of God's voice over the world's noise first thing in the morning. But the noise inevitably returns the moment we leave that quiet place. How do we sustain it during the rush of the workday, amidst constant interruptions?
We need to learn how to keep the soul anchored with what the essay calls simple breath prayers. These are brief, moment-by-moment requests or expressions of gratitude that you can carry into the interruptions. Something as simple as, "Lord, help," or "Father, thank you."
What are the spiritual and psychological mechanics of why these short prayers work so effectively to anchor the soul?
I think they interrupt the automatic cycle of worry and reaction. When an external demand or an internal worry hits, our mind tends to immediately start compiling schemes or complaints.
Right.
A breath prayer acts as a mental pause button, reorienting us toward the reality of God's presence. Spiritually, it's an acknowledgement that we are perpetually dependent, and it transforms that moment of stress into a moment of dependence. It prevents the churn of worry from taking over our disposition.
And the final, and perhaps most difficult part of this liturgy, is practicing quietness in conflict.
Absolutely. The liturgy means pausing to pray before you speak when tension arises, choosing that soft answer from Proverbs, and deciding in that moment to overcome evil with good. This is a difficult habit to acquire, but it is the signature mark of a quieted soul that trusts God with the outcome of the disagreement.
The second application point moves from our personal quietness to our public life, ordering our ambitions around quiet faithfulness. This seems to be the practical rebuttal to idleness and meddling.
It is the anti-idleness instruction. It connects faith directly to our vocation. Paul's instruction to the Thessalonians remains the ambition. We aim to do good work, to mind our own affairs, and provide for our needs as we are able.
And this diligence isn't just about paying the bills. It serves a dual purpose, right?
It does. Paul explicitly states they should do this so that your daily life may win the respect of outsiders and so that you will not be dependent on anybody. Quiet faithfulness in our labor is a form of Christian witness. It builds credibility and demonstrates integrity to the non-believing world. It is the visible fruit of a settled soul.
And achieving that credibility requires patience and steadiness, especially when we feel that urge for grand, visible action.
It requires a deep trust that steady, often unseen obedience over time accomplishes far more constructive good than bursts of noise or sporadic, spectacular gestures. And we have to apply this steadiness relationally, too.
How so?
We must encourage the idle and help the weak. We must strive to live at peace with all by quickly apologizing and freely forgiving. The quiet life always chooses the path that builds up the other person.
The third area of application focuses on the communal environment, cultivating humility and contentment in community. We don't practice quietness in isolation.
That's right. Community provides essential accountability because we are often blind to our own agitation or pride. We need brothers and sisters to gently notice when our tone drifts toward anxiety or arrogance. We are called to prefer others in honor and to learn to celebrate hidden service.
It seems like a key practice here is intentionally celebrating what is unseen to counter the world's focus on the visible and the loud.
Precisely. We remember the Lord sees in secret. True greatness in God's kingdom is measured by servanthood, often quiet servanthood, which resists the urge to climb socially or professionally by stepping on others. And furthermore, we have to actively fight comparison and the consumeristic clamor. When scarcity tempts us toward grumbling, we practice gratitude. When success tempts us toward boasting, we practice simplicity and generous sharing. A simple, generous, contented life is inherently quiet because it has no desire to flaunt or to acquire excessively.
The final application point, and perhaps the most stabilizing for our turbulent times, is to hold a hopeful horizon.
This is the eschatological grounding of our quietness. Philippians 4.5 tells us our gentleness should be evident to all because the Lord is at hand. Our quietness flourishes when the heart remembers that the final deliverance, the final justice, the final exaltation is near.
So we let the certainty of that future hope temper our present urgency.
We let it temper urgency with peace, ambition with love, and outrage with patience. We are instructed to set our minds on things above, where Christ is seated. When we do this, the constant striving of the world just loses its grip. Our quiet confidence, born from a confident horizon, becomes a powerful alternative witness. We carry peace into rooms that expect rage or panic.
Because we know the outcome is already guaranteed by the King who is both mighty and meek.
We become living demonstrations that we belong to another kingdom, whose pace is steady, whose justice is certain, and whose love is quiet.
This has been a really enriching deep dive. We've firmly established that the quiet life is not spiritual apathy, but an active, disciplined frame for deep faithfulness. It's characterized by prayer, humility, contentment, and kindness. The goal is to live a life whose ordinary, faithful obedience shines with a different light in a loud world.
The vision is for communities that are steady, productive, focused on building up their neighbors, and actively blessing those who cause them strife. The strength is found in trust, not in schemes.
And to bring us back to the ambition that started our conversation, we must remember Paul's direct instruction to the Thessalonians. This is the challenge and the promise of the quiet life.
Make it your ambition to lead a quiet life. You should mind your own business and work with your hands, so that your daily life may win the respect of outsiders, and so that you will not be dependent on anybody.
The encouragement is so clear. Integrity, self-sufficiency, and respect are the visible results of this deliberate, kingdom-focused ambition. The warning, conversely, is against the distractions of idleness and the corrosive noise of meddling in others' affairs. This is a path of focused diligence.
And we rest in the knowledge that we are not generating the strength ourselves. The ultimate source of this quiet ability is the Savior, who quiets his people with his love. His meekness defines true greatness, and it is in learning his pace and his heart that we find true rest for our souls.
May you practice the art of holy quiet this week. May your steps be steady, your prayer life be constant, your manner be kind, and your faith be brave, so that the world may see your good deeds and, in turn, glorify your Father in heaven.